Time for the SevereMMA preview show with Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and your host, Ian O'Neill.
Just the two of us, we can make it if we try. Just the two of us, you and I. That is right, we are back for another UFC preview show. We're just going at it with myself and Harry tonight. Shawnee's a little busy. Spencer's still on his holiday bobs and having a great time over in Newfoundland. I hope he is continuing to enjoy his trip over there and his well-deserved break. We're going to bring you the goods tonight. As always, Harry Powell is here to join me to break down the card that is headlined by Cory Sandhagen and Song Yadong. We will keep the dick jokes to a minimum if we can. Sean is going to be here, so not going to be here, so that's going to make things a lot more easier. But before we get into it, I want everybody to head over and check out our sponsors, All Real Nutrition. Head over to eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA, and get yourself some delicious, delicious, delicious protein bars. The best in the market, Irish made, like ourselves, at SevereMMA.com. Harry, how are things, my friend?
I'm grand now. Happy to be here. Happy to have some solo time with the main man himself. Yeah, happy as always. We talked a little bit off air about this card, and we said that I'll just go straight in. This is one of the cards that I like. This type of card is a card that I like. It's got guys and females that if you watch the UFC, follow MMA, you're going to know most of these guys. And most of it doesn't have vast changes to every division that each fight is in. But it's a card that will have a bunch of good fights. I'm sure there'll be some good performances. And the headline is a great fight. Really excited for that one. How are you, sir?
I am doing very well, thank you very much. I am looking forward to break down the card, as we like to call it, the hangover card after a mad UFC 279, but not a bad old hangover card, as you said. Lots of names spread throughout, and lots of kind of interesting potential storylines. And I guess I'd just like to start off maybe this week talking about the overall kind of landscape and the title picture in the bantamweight division, as you know, one of the best divisions in the UFC, the event being headlined by two bantamweights as well, in Sandhagen and Song Yadong. You know, we're kind of in the midst of a mini tournament right now, if you want to call it that, bantamweight. You know, we've seen Marlon Vera knock out Dominic Cruz. We've seen Marabdashvili take out Jose Aldo by decision, to all of our disappointments here on the UFC preview show, might I add, especially me and Harry's, but we shall move on. I mean, with some fights left to go, Harry, obviously we have the big UFC 280 card coming up next month. We have Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley on that card. Obviously we have Aljamain Sterling defending his title against TJ Dillashaw at that event. And this fight is kind of stuck and in the middle of everything, and it has some implementations of its own, if you want to call it. Where do you see this fight standing in the title picture overall?
So I like this fight for a number of reasons. I like this fight because it's a big test for Song Yadong. We've got lots of questions about him, about his style, about his ceiling. And Cory Sandhagen certainly is a man that's going to answer some of those questions for us. Cory Sandhagen obviously lost to Petr Yan in his first crack at the title, had an extremely close fight with TJ Dillashaw. On the night I scored it for Sandhagen. Watching it back, it's closer than I thought it was. Really, really competitive fight. Obviously, TJ now steps in and takes his shot at Aljamain Sterling. So Cory Sandhagen certainly is in and around that title picture and hasn't taken too much of a back step away. It feels to me that Marlon Vera is the guy that's rising the fastest. It feels as though he's the guy that possibly has the best stake at the title given his current run, but we also know that the UFC has a tendency to book guys that are in and around the title picture and have been in and around the title picture over and over and over again. But it feels to me that bantamweight, and maybe you can disagree, but it feels like bantamweight has so much blood in it, so much fresh blood, so much raw ability in these fighters that it's going to be hard to deny them as we move through these title ramificating fights. I think Merab Dvalishvili is probably 1 or 2 fights away. I think the style that he has, and this isn't the way it should be, this isn't the meritocracy that I would like, but this is the way that the UFC run, that if you are a wrestle heavy guy with not a ton of finishes and your style doesn't pertain to allow you to get dominant finishes, you're going to have a harder run to the title. Ask Leon Edwards. Mm-hmm. I think for this fight specifically, if Song Yadong wins, you could see him matched up with a Merab Dvalishvili, for instance, to really see who gets vaulted into that real elite tier of the 135 division. You may see the winner of this fight, Sean O'Malley, should he beat Piotr Jan, and that's a big should. You may see one of them even fight Piotr Jan if they win that fight. I think with a win here, Cory Sandhagen either fights Marlon Vera or potentially fights for the title after Marlon Vera. It seems to me that Vera has done enough to warrant a crack at the title. The Rob Font performance was far more impressive, in my opinion, than the Dom Cruz performance, given that Dom Cruz looked like a 40-year-old Dom Cruz. However, good he looked in the first couple of rounds. He started to fade, as we've talked about previously. But I think that Sandhagen is somebody that the UFC likes. His style is very fun. It's very fan-friendly. And he's somebody that, in the Piotr Jan fight, it was competitive. It wasn't a complete blowout. Cory Sandhagen was in that fight from, second 1 to minute 25. It was just that he was fighting a fighter that was one step ahead of him throughout that fight. And that's fine. These things happen in MMA. There's no shame in that whatsoever. So I think this fight is pivotal as we either see a new contender step forward onto the precipice of a massive fight, or we see somebody propel that contender just a little bit further down. We'll learn where the ceiling is for Song Yadong, and we'll have a better idea of where Cory Sandhagen is right now.
Absolutely, and I definitely nailed down that last point on Song Yadong's ceiling, because I think this fight defines and will give us a lot of answers in regards to our opinions on that. I would have to slightly disagree in thinking that either Vera, Dvalishvili, or Sandhagen are one fight away from a title shot, to be honest. To my surprise, when I opened up the rankings, we have Merab Dvalishvili sitting at number 3 right now in the rankings. So you've got Piotr Jan number 1, TJ Dillashaw number 2, Dvalishvili number 3, Cory Sandhagen 4, Marlon Vera 5. Those are the 5 major players. Obviously, we have Aljamain Sterling as the champion, but the 5 major players, including, I guess you have to, Sean O'Malley as well, who is ranked all the way down at number 13. But, a win over Piotr Jan, I would arguably say for Sean O'Malley, a win over Piotr Jan sees him leapfrog everybody there and get the title shot next. Rightfully or wrongfully, that's everyone's opinion, but that's the way it's going to be. You're spot on in your assessment of Merab Dvalishvili. The meritocracy is one thing, but entertaining factors is something that Merab Dvalishvili does not have in any of his fights, and nobody wants to really tune in and watch that. And I feel that he's going to be kind of like this gatekeeper to the top of the division, where you might even see Marlon Vera and Dvalishvili matched up next. And I feel that will be for the UFC's benefit because it knocks one of them down a little bit in the pecking order. But back to Cory Sandhagen, I feel with this fight, it's a good kind of reset for him to kind of, dust himself off after the disappointments that he's faced recently in the loss to TJ Dillashaw and also the loss to Peter Yan. Both very, very competitive fights, but not completely a throwaway fight in regards competitiveness here, because I feel Song Yadong is one of the future fighters of the bantamweight division, especially from what we've seen so far. His age and his potential and his ceiling is what we call it, because he's an unbelievably good fighter. And watching back tape on him, I forgot how good he was, to be honest. And I'm really excited to see him coming in here against Cory Sandhagen, to see how good he actually is, because if he's to get the win against Cory Sandhagen, he's going to have to be considered a very, very, very good fighter, and he will be up there as a mainstay in the top 5 of the bantamweight division for some time yet. A loss against Cory Sandhagen for Song Yadong is not the worst thing. He's 24. He has lots of time to improve. So I feel that this is the right fight for both fighters for kind of different reasons. A win for Cory Sandhagen here against Song Yadong is a good win. Anybody who might not have their finger on the pulse might say, who's this Song Yadong guy? The risk and reward is way more valuable to Song Yadong than it is to Cory Sandhagen coming in here. But this is one of the top rising young fighters and one of the top prospects that we're seeing right now in the bantamweight division in Song Yadong. And, he's ran some elite level, elite, I throw that word out there. I don't want to say elite. He's had some good wins. I feel, that win over Marlon Vera, even it being a close fight, you could definitely have scored that to Song Yadong. A little bit of blip in the radar against Kyler Phillips would probably prove that he was not ready for that challenge at the time. Maybe that little bit of inexperience paid the price for him that time against in the Phillips fight. 3 wins since then against Casey Kenny, Julio Arce, and Marlon Moraes, 2 very vicious knockouts in these last 2 fights, have led him to this Cory Sandhagen fight. And it's an intriguing battle, isn't it, Harry? When you're looking at somebody like Song Yadong, what attributes do you see in him as a fighter, and what do you like about watching him?
Power. That's
Big
the thing
time.
that's tattooed across his forehead.
And
right?
so important in this day and age where impactful strikes score as well.
100%. I think so. My question on Song Yadong is, it feels to me is that he's at a bit of a crossroads in his career. He's very experienced in terms of fighting for a man of only 24. This is his 26th fight. That's a lot of fights for a young man. And that can stand you in good stead in one way, that you've worked out a lot of the kinks of this fighting thing from the intangible perspective, the stress of the weight cut week, the whole fight week thing, the press conference thing, the weigh-in, the rehydration, the stress on the night, the nerves, the walk, all of that stuff. That gives him a great opportunity to have done it 26 times, this to be his 27th. The thing that I question is whether he is going to, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, whether he's going to turn into a Jeremy Stephens, in that he's a limited fighter because of his power, or whether he can turn into a TJ Dillashaw who has massive power, but uses that as a single attribute in conjunction with many attributes of his game. And I think that this is the perfect fight to find out which one he's chosen right now. As you've said, and I think it's a really important point, at 24, he has every opportunity in the next 10 years, should he want to fight that long, to make some changes. Should he slip up here and there? Fighting Cory Sandhagen at 24 years of age is the perfect test for you, should you have the amount of experience behind him. He offers the length, the range, the versatility, the transition grappling, the transition striking, the pace. He offers everything that you need for a guy like Song Yadong. And you asked, what do I like about watching him? What I like about watching him actually is his killer instinct. There's not a massive amount of takeaways from him until he lands. And when he lands the first shot and he knows that you're hurt, or he knows that you didn't like the shot, that's where his game opens up and he blossoms into this murderer, right? We saw that against Moraes. Now, we have to take the Moraes performance with a pinch of salt. This is the ghost of Marlon Moraes, but the Julio Arce fight, that's a murderer. And that's really exciting. It's really exciting, and I'll chuck it over to you for your thoughts on the fight before we jump any further, this is two completely different styles of fighter going together. We get to find out where each of them are and how these styles blend together over 25 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting stylistic matchup. Song Yadong coming in there with that brute force and the power, whereas we have Cory Sandhagen, who likes this elusive movement in and out, landing strikes, getting in, getting his shots off, and getting back out. And he's been very successful in doing that. The lack of power, I feel, in this fight for Cory Sandhagen, if it goes all 5 rounds, and if Song Yadong can maintain the pace, will be huge for Song Yadong. Now, that is one big asterisk for me over Song Yadong, is that we've seen him getting tired in fights. And that's simply because what you said is that he carries so much power. And when you're thrown with brute force, even if you land or if you stay missing, you're going to drain that gas tank. And we kind of have seen that in fights. We've seen it in the Vera fight where he was competitive up until maybe minute 7, minute 8 before he started to fade. And I think in this, a 5-round fight, he's going to have to kind of find that fine balance between, not going 100 miles an hour and trying to go for the finish. It's fighting in spurts, and this only comes in experience. So this is his first 5-round fight in the UFC, so it'll be interesting to see how he kind of manages all of that and manages his gas tank, because he's going to have to against Cory Sandhagen, who arguably starts slow and finishes strong in fights. So we have a guy in Song Yadong who will start fast and finish slow against a guy who starts kind of slow and finishes faster. So that's that interesting dynamic that we're dealing with in this fight in particular. He has Uriah Faber. Song Yadong has Uriah Faber in his corner, a very good guy to have. So I'm sure that that's the information that's going to be coming across to Song Yadong. It all depends whether he has his conditioning right, whether he can last the pace. Another benefit, I think, in having Team Alpha Male in your corner for Song Yadong is that they've kind of built their whole camp, and they have for many years, trying to defeat an elusive striker in Dominic Cruz. So they have worked against similar opponents to Cory Sandhagen, and they may have been able to develop similar kind of movements or patterns to try and catch Cory Sandhagen out. You know what I mean? Song Yadong is the style of fighter that we've seen somewhat with Cody Garbrandt, and he's coming forward with explosive power. Now, I feel I don't want to make that comparison to Cody Garbrandt because it's an unfair comparison, but I feel that Song Yadong has some similarities to him, and they were always trying to beat Dominic Cruz on the come up. So I'm interested to see how well the game plan, because the ultimate test was that Garbrandt fight against TJ or against Dominic Cruz back in the day, where he was also impressive in landing his counter shots against the counter striker. So that all is a fine accumulation of maybe Cody Garbrandt preparing or trying to emulate Dominic Cruz and completely understanding his style. We don't know what fight IQ Song Yadong has. We don't know too much his ability to make reads against elite level competition as well, but we're going to fucking find that out on Saturday night. And I'm excited to see it go down with Cory Sandhagen. I just think that he doesn't have to change all too much. Like, he was involved in 2 really, really close fights, and on another night he could be coming off the back of a win of TJ Dillashaw and Peter Yan. Really, I did score, funnily enough, at the time, both of those fights. First one to Dillashaw and the second one I did score to Peter Yan, but I ain't going to sit here and argue if you scored it the other way, because they're really, really close fights. to me, this fight is more so looking at Cory Sandhagen as a reset. Okay, he's come in against the likes of Dillashaw and Yan. He's found out the hard way. He's left it into the judges' score cards, and it hasn't gone his way. So this is his reset fight. This is a fight where, you know, he's coming up against a young up and comer. He's probably confident coming into this fight. This is the start of his last title run, in my opinion. I feel Cory Sandhagen is coming in with the pressure on his shoulders that he needs to start delivering, and a win over Song Yadong is a great start. It's not going to be enough to get him a title shot. He probably will have to fight once. You never know, twice more, depending on who the champion is. Are they going to want to put him in against Yan again if Yan gets the nod, or if Dillashaw wins against Sterling, are they going to want to put him in there again? I know he's going to want it, but will the UFC want it? It's hard to know. They're fond of making rematches, so I mean, anything can happen. And I think that's what makes the bantamweight division really, really good and exciting too, is that we have all of these variables going on, and there's all these moving parts as well in the division too, that kind of make it a little bit exciting. Well, I guess, you know, I've gave my kind of assessment in what I think. What do you think from an analytical standpoint in this fight? And what are you looking at as, you know, some of the aspects that these fighters could gain an advantage over one another here?
So I think the obvious advantage is in immediate punching power. Right? In immediate punching power, it is clear that Song Yadong has insane power in his hands. But we forget that Cory Sandhagen wheel kicked Marlon Moraes into oblivion. We forget that he lifted Frankie Edgar off his feet with a flying knee. We forget that, you know, he finishes Austin Arnett with a body shot. We forget that he finishes Yuri Alcantara with ground and pound. Like, the man can finish fights, and he can finish fights in single shots. I think the thing that screams out to me, if I'm Song Yadong here, is I need to perform like Marlon Vera did against Rob Font. That's the fight. That's the fight. Rob Font doesn't kick as aggressively as Cory Sandhagen does, but he has a similar body frame, maybe slightly shorter, maybe slightly long, like shorter as in length as well as height. But I need to conserve my energy, and I need to land. And when I land, it's got to be impactful. He doesn't jab a lot anyway, right? A lot of the shots that are coming are just big hooks, wild uppercuts, big, massive head kicks, big body kicks. Everything is large. Everything is impactful. And as you've said, we've seen over 15 minutes that can drain him considerably. Obviously, when you're carrying so much muscle and you're throwing everything at 100%, that's a really difficult task to do for 5 minutes, let alone 15. If I'm Cory Sandhagen, this is my fight to lose. I feel like Cory Sandhagen is the more versatile fighter. His stance switching is gorgeous and seamless. He switches stance as he's exiting the pocket. He turns corners with stance switches. He stance switches as he's going forward. The length of Cory Sandhagen is a real asset in this fight, in my opinion. Cory does something really beautiful in the opening minute against TJ Dillashaw, and that's he walks into the pocket, creates an exchange, and has TJ thinking that they're going to get into a striking battle, a striking exchange. He then starts to exit the pocket, baiting TJ to follow him, chase him, which TJ does. Cory then takes a long step with that big back leg of his, taking him really far out of the pocket, and then he plants his feet and lands a right hand on TJ as he comes in. That almost sits TJ down, but, you know, TJ rides it and whatever. That length and that baiting is something that will work fantastically well against Song Yadong, who, as we've already said, when he lands, tunnel vision now. Everything is about getting that person out of there. That's when we see his footwork come in. That's when we see his feints. He throws a lovely feint uppercut against Marlon Moraes. 1, to bank the reaction, and 2, because the hands will come together and he then throws 2 big hooks. So the oscillation between whether you take the uppercut or whether you take the hook is there at all times. Those things are gorgeous. But if I'm Cory Sandhagen, I know that my grappling's okay, unless it's against Aljamain Sterling. These things happen in MMA. I know that my get-up game is okay. I know that I have Granbies in my back pocket. I know that I have leg entries that are used to sweep. In the TJ Dillashaw fight, he fails a flying knee and turns it into an inverted triangle. Who does that against TJ Dillashaw of all people? I think my game plan, if I'm Cory Sandhagen, is I'm going to take the first round to allow Song Yadong to come in. I'm going to chop at his legs. I'm going to kick at his body. And I'm going to do my best to circle off and stay away from the power. In the second round, I'm going to grapple, and I'm going to grapple heavy. I'm going to drain those arms. I'm going to fill them up with lactic acid. So now his legs are a little bit beat up. His body's a little bit beat up, and he's tired from the grappling. Then in the third, fourth, and fifth, we just ask where he is. You just ask him questions. Do you still want the body shots? Do you still want the jabs? Do you still want the footwork? Do you still want the movement? Because Song Yadong just needs one to turn that fight around. And I think this is where the conversation is going to happen, is can Cory Sandhagen circumnavigate the power of Song Yadong, wearing him down over the fight and allowing that power to sap away? Or is Song Yadong going to catch Cory Sandhagen, who, prior to this fight, and who knows what's going to happen, has never been stopped to strikes before? And he's fought some big hitters.
He sure has. And that is the key here. I feel if anything is going to fail Song Yadong, it will be his gas tank, unless he fights a little bit more smartly. I feel Sandhagen obviously has the height reach advantage there. I think he's deceptively strong in the clinch and in general in his grappling, and I think he proved that against Peter Yan and TJ Dillashaw as well, who had some success but not overbearing success in those fights as well. So I feel with Song Yadong, if Cory Sandhagen can time some of his big shots as well, he is a little bit susceptible to that lead leg kick and that lead leg getting kicked off of him. I think Marlon Vera tried but didn't stick with it in that fight, and I feel if he had, he probably would have, number one, taken a little bit of juice off the power, and obviously the movement is another factor. It's not said enough. Obviously, the dangers of throwing leg kicks in fights as well. They could completely backfire on you. And someone who is really dependent on movement, like Cory Sandhagen, is probably not too forthcoming in wanting to throw that shot all that much in case it gets checked. You could look at Tony Ferguson against Nate Diaz, a great tactic, but you end up with a big gash on your leg if one gets checked, or you throw one and it lands on the knee. It could really mess you up altogether. And I feel Sandhagen is probably going to have confidence in his speed and his accuracy coming in and out and getting his shots off. He's just going to have to be, I think, very careful in the early stages, and that's in round 1 and round 2 against Song Yadong. And I feel the game plan that you laid out that he should follow is absolutely perfect. You keep him guessing in round 1, you get your timing on the feet with them in round 1, and then you initiate that grappling in round 2. You get him working, you test his gas tank, and you give him no option there. I think Cory Sandhagen, if he plays his cards right and if he stays out in trouble here, could get Song Yadong out there. I think Song Yadong is very durable. I think that will stand to his benefit, and I think that Cory Sandhagen doesn't have enough punching power to get him out of there. But like you said, you have the wheel kick, you have the flying knees. And if you're a little bit tired and if you're a little bit lethargic, those are right there for the taking for Cory Sandhagen in rounds 4 or rounds 5. So I think that's likely the fight that we're going to see. And there's many more questions lingering over Song Yadong in this fight than there is Cory Sandhagen. We know what he's capable of. We don't quite know what Song Yadong is capable of yet. This is the biggest and the hardest test of his career so far. So I'm excited to see how he lives up to it. And I'm not going to throw him away in regards thinking that he'd never be a champion if he doesn't win this fight, because he is very, very young. And yes, he has a lot of fights, but you need to get that UFC experience to it. You need to get that 5-round experience. This is probably Sandhagen's maybe 3rd, 4th fight as a 5-rounder. Some have gone the distance, some haven't. But, I guess the only question I would ask you before we maybe round up on the main event, Harry, is, if you're if you're Cory Sandhagen's team, and we said he doesn't need to change up all too much, but look at, he's lost his last two, so he needs to maybe make some minor adjustments. What do you tell him to do to maybe turn those close split decisions and those other decision losses into wins? What do you feel he needs to bring into his game or take out of his game in order to kind of turn those losses into wins?
He needs to do more. And for a volume fighter, that sounds a bit harsh, but even he said it himself in a post-fight interview, not immediately after the fight, but a couple of days later. I think he spoke to Ariel or he spoke to somebody, and he said he watched the fight back of the TJ Dillashaw fight, and there were moments in there that he could have done more. He could have put his foot on the gas more, but he was worried about burning his own gas tank. But he felt that he got to the end of the 5th round, and the worst thing about that fight was that he had gas left. And he's like, if I'd have spent that gas during that fight, I probably would have won. And he's probably
100%. And Song Yadong could be in the similar situation in this fight when you just don't know. And I think your point was excellent there. I feel in particular in that TJ Dillashaw, he chose to settle in the clinch for far too long and settled for that position, which is pretty much a nullified position if you're not landing any heavy shots, if you're not landing some dirty boxing or knees, if you're a lot of that fight was in the clinch against the cage where guys are just trying to reverse one another, and judges aren't going to score that either way. They're going to score based off what happens when they separate. So I think he did learn those lessons against Peter Yan, but still kind of fell a little bit short in that fight, which is totally fine. It's against Peter Yan, but I think we saw that up in kind of pace as the fight went on against Peter Yan, except Peter Yan was able to do exactly the same. And it will be interesting to see in this fight with Song Yadong, who hasn't proven yet that he can do that. And I think if he comes into this fight and that happens again, I think Cory Sandhagen will probably go on, maybe get a 4th or 5th round finish, or likely win a decision. That's the way I can see it. Song Yadong, for me, if he gets it, it's going to be a big shot early, and he's going to catch Sandhagen either coming in or maybe with a counter on the way out. Easier said than done, but I think it's a 2-round fight for Song Yadong. It's a 5-round fight for Cory Sandhagen, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes down. Any final takeaways before we move on?
4th round rear naked choke. Cory Sandhagen gets the job.
Gadoosh. There you have it. Moving on to the co-main event, and we'll scoop quickly through the rest of these fights. We'll kind of cherry pick a couple of these and maybe scoop past a few. Chidi Njokuani is going in there in the middleweight division against Gregory Rodriguez. UFC putting him into co-main event slot for no other reason only they're trying to give Chidi a little bit of a jump up and a little bit of a shine. They're trying to get him into the severe spotlight position for Harry Powell to kind of shine a light on him on Mondays. I know he'll be excited. He'll be nervous to see if he can do that as well, Harry, I reckon. What do you reckon yourself? How do you see this co-main event going down? How big of a player can you see Chidi Njokuani or Gregory Rodriguez in the middleweight division? I'd be more high on Chidi Njokuani myself, more so than Gregory Rodriguez. I believe that this is a fight that the UFC has set up in order to kind of showcase Chidi a little bit. Do you think that they'll be successful in what they're trying to do from a marketing perspective?
I don't know, to be honest. I have this as a 50-50. I think Chidi Njokuani is a fighter that obviously likes to get it done early, but he's susceptible. If you look at the fight against Dusan Todorovic, obviously they've both fought him, but Njokuani jumps on a front headlock and then jumps on an anaconda that's nowhere near, really. He muscles his way through the gator roll in order to try and lock it up. And Dusan Todorovic just sort of stays 4-pointed, like, I don't really know what you're trying to do here, but you're not going to choke me. And then eventually, they move on, and eventually Chidi Njokuani gets himself back up. But if you're doing that against Gregory Rodriguez, who can legitimately grapple, you're going to find yourself in problems. Now, the question for me is Rodriguez going to employ a smart game plan, or are we going to see a repeat of the Armen Petrosian where he just wants to stand and bang? And that was a very close fight, you know. It was a split
He can
decision.
get drawn into that a little bit too, and I think that's what Chidi is going to try and maybe get him to do this time around as well. And I think if that happens, I don't know if he's going to get away with it with Chidi. If you're smart here, and I'm sure Gregory Rodriguez and his team are, they're going to be coming in here with a game plan to try and take this fight down for definitely portions of the fight. Like, I don't think it's going to be 100% wrestle heavy or jiu-jitsu heavy game plan from him, but smart thinking, you would be looking to try and take the fight down where you must feel he has an advantage on the mat, Rodriguez. But like I said, when you're in there and things get a little bit cray-cray, he does kind of get drawn into a firefight too, which would make this fight super interesting.
It would, but then, you know, we all thought that Julian Marquez had an iron chin, and Rodriguez, you know, put it in a furnace and was like, it's liquid now. He's dead. Like, that man has significant power. Now, if we just do a quick run over Chidi Njokuani's record, the fighters that he's lost to in John Salter, Koreshkov obviously can do the grappling, but it didn't go that far. And then Rafael Carvalho, like, these guys can grapple. John Salter choked him out in a round. You don't think Gregor Rodriguez can do the same thing? Like, I think this fight comes down to what Gregor Rodriguez walks into the cage on Saturday night. If he chooses to be grappling heavy, I think that he can have some real success. And Njokuani leaves himself in some nefarious positions on the ground, and there's holes there, and there's room for Rodriguez to do the grappling. If they just want to stand in the middle and bang, it'll be fun for however long it lasts, and one of them's going to land a big shot. I don't really have a good read, and as it's an intangible as to which Rodriguez is going to come in, but it certainly feels like in the last couple of fights he's fallen in love with the hands and with the striking. I just don't think in this fight it's the smartest way to go about it.
Yeah, I feel like the first real exchange in this fight will probably tell its own story when both guys can kind of feel what power or what each other possesses will kind of probably define where Gregory Rodriguez wants to take this fight. It'll be interesting to kind of see in the middleweight division as we move on. Andre Fili takes on Bill Algeo in the featherweight division. I mean, it hasn't really been happening as of late for Andre Touchy-Feely. A couple of losses, a couple of no contests, only one win in his last 5 against Charles Jourdain by split decision. He's really got to start to make it happen really in the featherweight division. And a guy in Andre Fili who I feel we've only seen flashes of brilliance, and I don't think he's produced inside the octagon to the level that he's capable of, really.
I couldn't agree more. Andre Fili's style when he's on is amazing to watch. He's a guy that doesn't have huge power, so he has to make up for it with versatility. And I think that's a really interesting style when you approach it the way that he does. Super long, super gangly for the division, uses a jab well, uses a footwork well, can wrestle, can do the grappling, has submission threats. And when he starts putting his combinations together and his footwork together, it's gorgeous to watch. And then he gets stopped in 2 rounds, or he gets out grappled, or he doesn't turn up. I don't know what it is. It feels to me as though maybe his head isn't all the way in it. He seems to have, and this is going to sound horrendous when I say it, but he seems to have a nice life, right? And it doesn't seem like he needs fighting like others need fighting. It feels, and this is an intangible, an absolute assumption, but it feels like he has a solid relationship. It feels like he has a good set of friends around him. And it feels like he does MMA for fun, because that's just something that he enjoys and it's a passion of his. At the top of the UFC, that's not enough. Like, it's not enough to just enjoy the sport, love the sport. You have to live and breathe the sport. And as I said, maybe that's what Andre Fili does. But if he doesn't turn up against Bill Algeo will do Bill Algeo things, right?
You're going to have to bring in Gilbert Burns to carry Fili out of the ring again if Algeo has his way, huh?
Right. And I think that this is a fight that if if Andre Fili is 90% of the way on, he styles on Bill Algeo. He absolutely styles on him. But this is a fight to me that the UFC is handing to Bill Algeo. This is the middle of the pack litmus test, right? It's like, okay, Herbert Burns didn't fancy fighting that night. Grand. Let's see a guy who's tough to finish, but is finishable, is tough to break, but is breakable. But if he's on, he's going to give you one hell of a fight. That's to me what this feels like.
Yeah, it's just, to me, just a good fight in the middle of an all right card. To me, I don't think either one of these guys are going to be any major players ever in the featherweight division. But, you know, Bill Algeo, I feel definitely from this side of the pond got a little bit of disregard because of his fight with Brendan Loughnane. And that's unfortunate a little bit. Some of the shine has been taken off his performances, but nonetheless, he absolutely destroyed Herbert Burns in that last fight. I'm just looking on Topology here. Won that fight, exhaustion from damage. Maybe the first exhaustion from damage win in UFC history. That has yet to be seen. But your point in saying that Herbert Burns was a guy who probably did not want to be in there in comparison to Andre Fili, who at times can be guilty of not wanting to be in there too. But if he is in there, if he does want to be in there on Saturday night and he is game in this fight, it should make for a really interesting fight. And that's the thing. Andre Fili brings that kind of excitement when he is on, but he's just so hit and miss. It's hard to know. Just a little small bit also on the next fight, Joseph Pfeiffer. I seen his performance on the Dana White Contender Series this year was very impressive. I'm very impressed by this guy. He has a great story, vicious knockout power. He trains out of the same gym as Pat Sabatini and Sean Brady and those guys there. So he's coming from a good camp in Philadelphia. And I feel, you know, he won with a savage left hook knockout over Ozzy Diaz in the Contender Series. And I'm excited. He's definitely one to look out for. He comes in against Alan Emendowski in the middleweight division. And I feel, you know, it's a winnable fight for him too. Emendowski is decent competition, but he's lost his last 3. This is probably the last time we're probably going to see him in the UFC. They're like, here, Joe, we like you as a guy. We feel that, you know, you have something to offer us in the UFC. We're going to give you a guy on a 3-fight win streak and let you give him his marching orders for him. So that's kind of the ins and outs of that fight there. Tanner Boser against Rodrigo Nascimento. How do you see this fight going? Tanner Boser is a kind of a guy as well who's been very hit and miss in the UFC. Obviously lost to Arlovsky and Latifi. Got in there last time against an overblown OSP and got the knockout win. Back fighting guys in his own weight now. It'll be interesting to see how this Nascimento fight goes. Is this one that kind of tickles your fancy, or could you give a shit about it at all?
No.
Thought so. So let's move on, shall we? On to the next one. I feel that this card actually kind of strangely gets better as we're moving down along it rather than the other way around. You know what I mean? We have to spend some time, Harry, and you'll love this. We have to spend some time on one of the most dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists in the game right now. The 2019 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion after beating Rodolfo Vieira in 2021. Jeez, I thought that was way further back. The 2021 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, after his great win over Rodolfo Vieira, picked up a win over Josh Fremd in his last fight, comes in against Marc-Andre Baralt, another kind of a difficult test, and a litmus test too against a very experienced guy for Fluffy Hernandez. It'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Any thoughts on this one?
This is just whether Barrio can stop the takedown, right? If Barrio can stop the takedown, I think Fluffy Hernandez is there to be hit. This is a very quintessential striker versus grappler. The Josh Fremd fight, I think it was his UFC debut or like a couple of fights into the UFC. It was very much Fluffy Hernandez was pretty tired, but Josh Fremd was more tired, and the grappling happened and he won a decision. It wasn't anything to write home about. I think for Barrio, he's probably going to have the size advantage here, and I think he will certainly have the striking advantage. The question is, how long can he keep Fluffy Hernandez off his hips for? And if he can do it for a considerable amount of time, I think he wins this fight. If Hernandez is able to get the takedown early and is able to hold him for significant periods, then, it's a tough ask. It's a tough ask.
It sure is. That fight taking place in the middleweight division too. Quite a few middleweight fights, three on the main card. For our pleasure or our displeasure, depending what way you look at the middleweight division in the UFC right now. But it's crying out, the middleweight division, for some up and comers. So UFC trying to provide some in this card. A fight that I'm really looking forward to, and one that I would like to talk about, is the prelims headliner, and that's Damon Jackson versus Pat Sabatini. A really, really interesting stylistic matchup. And you mentioned if Berholt could keep Fernandez on the feet, I feel you would feel that he would have the advantage. I kind of feel the same in this fight, although I do want to see some grappling here, because both of these guys are absolutely unbelievable grapplers and very explosive on the mat as well. Are you excited for this one, as I am?
Yeah, I like this fight a lot, actually. I think Sabatini is more of an explosive grappler, explosive big double legs. Damon Jackson's going to wear on you. He's going to table you. He's going to drag you to the mat. And then when he gets there, he's got a crushing top pressure. The problem I have with Damon Jackson in his last fight, I'm just pulling up, I can't remember who his last fight was. Argueta, that's right. It was his UFC debut. And Damon Jackson spent significant portions of that fight on Argueta's back and did nothing with it. That's something that cannot continue. If you take a dominant grappling position, in order to score in MMA, you have to be doing something with it. Whether that's forcing belly down landing strikes, whether that's searching for chokes, whatever it is you're choosing to do, holding the position is not enough. And what we saw in that fight was Dan Argueta was landing these shots whilst having his back taken that caused quite a swelling on the eye of Damon Jackson. Those are significant, impactful strikes. And that's something that's going to score with the referee, with the judges, right? So if I'm Damon Jackson, I'm looking to put Pat Sabatini on his back. I feel like this is, we may see that youth, physicality, and explosiveness is going to be a tougher ask than Damon Jackson's crushing top pressure. But I would love to see this hit the mat. I think Sabatini probably carries more power on the feet and a bit more speed on the feet, but Damon Jackson has a really long jab, a nice right hand. So I'm excited for this fight. It's going to be a great fight.
Yes, Sabatini himself, no joke on the mat as well. And you know what? He could be also labeled as guilty of being taking guys' backs and not doing too much with it either. That happened in the Tucker Lutz fight. That happened in the TJ Laramie fight. Pat Sabatini has been a guy I've been keeping an eye on even since he joined the UFC, the former Cage Fury featherweight and I believe lightweight champion as well. But he definitely was the featherweight champion there. And coming out of Renzo Gracie Philly too, the same gym as Sean Brady and those guys as well. You know, really, really good pedigree coming into this fight. I feel Sabatini is probably going to want to try and keep this on the feet. I'd say he fancies himself as the better striker, the more powerful striker. But like yourself, Harry, I would really like to see this fight hit the mat just to see how these guys kind of match up with each other on down there. So I'd be leaning towards Sabatini. I just think he's the better overall fighter and more well-rounded fighter than the two. But an interesting fight and a good fight to kind of headline the prelims as well. Trevin Giles versus Lewis Koch is the other prelim in the welterweight division. I mean, that is what it is, to be honest.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, the one fight I do want to kind of concentrate on is Aspen Ladd versus Sarah McMahon. A really good fight in the bantamweight division, in the women's bantamweight division. How do you kind of see this fight going down? Like, Aspen Ladd is, you know, she's frustrating. She's been known for weight missing. She hasn't shown her true potential yet in the UFC. You know, I think Aspen Ladd is the type of woman that if she gets everything together and can put it together in a fight, that she can be a big problem here in the bantamweight division. But, you know what? She just hasn't been able to do it yet. One win in her last three. The only win against Yana Kunitskaya, which is an all right win, but losses against Jermaine Durandamy, where she was, she got knocked out relatively easy early on there. Norma Dumont picked up a decision, and Raquel Rocky Peddington picked up a decision over her in her last fight. Being scooting up and down from featherweight to bantamweight, she's got to get her weight issues right. And this is probably the big kind of thing that's hanging over this fight, is she going to be able to weigh in at 135 for this fight? And that's the first problem she has to face. And the second problem she has to face is a very, very good, durable fighter in Sarah McMahon as well, who has been looking good in recent fights. How do you kind of see this fight going down, Harry?
I feel as though we probably will never know, but there's some intangibles going on with Aspen Ladd, and that's the reason why this potential isn't being reached. We saw the controversy with the corner work. I mean, look, I brand that as you have to trust that the corner know their fighter and the way to speak and deal with their fighter to get them to react. And what we did see in that third round is she came out and won the third round against Raquel Pennington when she seemed like she'd coasted the first and bits of the second. You mentioned perfectly that when she's on and everything's together, she's a wrecking ball. When she's on top, she lands those incredibly impactful ground and pound strikes. She's very positionally dominant, and it feels to me as though this is a fight that's been set up against a 41-year-old Sarah McMahon that loves to grapple, that's all the way in Aspen Ladd's wheelhouse. And I feel like the UFC are throwing her final bone. If she doesn't get this win, I don't think we see Aspen Ladd too much longer in the UFC. If she does get the win, it's okay, here's your chance at a rebuild now. But you're right that the weight issues is a big problem. You're right that I think that there are some mental blocks there as to why she isn't able to necessarily go as quickly as she wants to, and she needs to be brought out of her shell a little bit, which is crazy to think that you're in a fist fight and you're reserved and sort of passively watching. But I feel like if Aspen Ladd is anywhere near the fighter that we think that she is, she should beat Sarah McMahon. But Sarah McMahon, we know exactly what's coming. When we get to the grappling, it's going to be dominant, it's going to be really, really stifling, and there's some damage to be landed too. But this to me is how good are you? Are you deserving of still being in the UFC or not?
Yeah, that's what I feel this is too. And, the getting down to weight is one thing. How you feel in there after making the weight is another. And you don't want to be feeling tired in rounds 2 or rounds 3 against someone like Sarah McMahon, who's going to be in your face, who is going to be looking for the takedown the entire fight as well. And if she does get you down, it ain't easy to get back up as well with her wrestling credentials. So I think many of the question marks do lie over Aspen Ladd in this fight. It'll be interesting to see, number one, for me, if she can make weight and what she looks like at that weight. I feel a win, even though Sarah McMahon is 41, it would be a good win for Aspen Ladd, and it would kind of kickstart her kind of career in the 135-pound division. But there's going to be plenty of other more difficult tests and plenty of other weight cuts ahead for Aspen Ladd. So the book is not written on her story quite yet. Just to scoot down a little quick, Loma Lookbomi facing Denise Gomez in the strawweight division. Trey Ogden facing Danielle Zellhuber in the lightweight division. Zellhuber coming in as an undefeated Dana White Contender Series alumni. Always interesting in looking at an undefeated guy. I want to kind of stop at Maria Agapova versus Jillian Robertson here. My guy Andy Hickey on Twitter today posted a fantastic stat saying that both of these women are finishers. They hold 60% finish rates in their fights. So, if you're a better, you are looking to bet the under on this fight, it might be a good one to do it. Both women like to come out and finish. And, you know, with Gillian Robertson, she does have that grapple heavy kind of game plan coming into each fight. And if that doesn't work for her, she can't get the fight down. She's kind of left clutching at straws somewhat. Anything to add on this fight, or shall we move on to the next?
I mean, Gillian Robertson might be one of the most frustrating fighters in the UFC. I don't understand how she can have such a dominant top game and nothing else. I just don't understand it. When you watch her get the fight to the mat, she is very impressive. Very, very, very impressive. When that position is reversed, or when that position, or when she's placed in that position, it's as if she's never grappled a day in her life, and I don't understand it. But yeah, I mean, whoever gets the fight to the mat first wins this fight, I think.
Absolutely. That's a great call, in fairness. Now, this is the opening up Nicholas Mottel versus Cameron Van Camp in the lightweight division as well. Good on them. A fight that will round off and we'll talk about is my guy versus your guy, Harry. Let's get it on. Tony G, my guy Tony G, Tony Gravely coming in there against Javid Bashrat. Bashrat living off the buzz of his brother getting rewarded a contract last night in the Contender Series. The Bashrat brothers have arrived in the UFC, and I'm excited to see this one because we're going to find out in this fight, Harry, how good of a grappler Javid Bashrat is and how he will be able to handle the wrestling of Tony Gravely. Gravely himself holds power, but I feel if he chooses to stand and bang in this fight with Javid Bashrat, it's going to be bad news. I can see Gravely coming in here, closing the distance, trying to put Bashrat on his back and landing some strikes. How do you see the fight going? Are you excited? This is a good test for Javid Bashrat here. Do you think it's too much of a test this early in his UFC career, Harry?
This is a rough assignment. This is a rough assignment. I think it's really difficult to go from Trevin Jones, who is basically just a hitter, right? Just got a massive right hand that if you can stay away from it and do the rest of the fighting bits, you'll be okay, to somebody who's a veteran like Tony Gravely. And I don't mean that in that he's on the slide. I mean that he knows exactly who he is as a fighter. He went in his last fight and put Johnny Munoz Jr. away, which is no joke. He has the win over Anthony Birchik. He has a loss. He has a win to Simon Oliveira. Okay, he took a loss to Nate Maness, but we all know that Nate Maness only drops fights to really, really good fighters.
And Tony Gravely had him hurt badly in that fight at the end of the first round as well. And if 15 seconds and he would have won that fight, but nonetheless, he did lose. Maness a good fighter too.
I think for Bashrat, he certainly has a grappling pedigree. You know, growing up in Afghanistan, he certainly has elements of that. And I know that having spent a lot of time with his brother and with, how have I forgotten his name? Who's the flyweight fighter? Swedish guy. How have I forgotten his name?
Oh, I know. I'll get it for you.
Amir Albazi.
Amir Albazi, that's the one. Yeah.
Those three are very, very tight knit. Obviously, you see them running around together all the time. They all support each other at other fights. Amir Albazi is a very credited grappler himself, and they've spent a lot of time together. So there'll be a lot of knowledge that's been transferred between the pair of them. So I'm sure that he's knows what he's doing, both in the wrestling, clinch, and ground exchanges. But it just feels to me that this is maybe a little bit too soon. He's only 27, Javid Bashrat. It doesn't feel like it needs this level of push this quickly. I feel as though if he wins in impressive fashion, that we're off to the races.
Absolutely.
If he loses, I just don't really understand. Like nothing happens really. Like we know that, okay, he's maybe not ready for the middle of the pack litmus test right now, but I feel like the Tony Gravely fight should have been maybe the third or fourth fight into the UFC, not the second. But look, as you say, and you're right in saying, if this stays on the feet, Basharat has lots of tools, has really good footwork, good head movement, and is more than able to rock you to your boots with the shots. Gravely, whilst being no mug on the feet, I think this is a fight that he wants to get to the ground if he can. And the question is, Basharat hang?
Yeah, that's the big question for me. I would be hopeful coming into this fight that Gravely hasn't really fallen in love with his striking and wants to hunt for that knockout again. I have not seen that man as fired up as he was against Johnny Munoz Jr. I was lucky enough to talk to Tony Gravely a couple of interviews, and he is probably one of the nicest guys I've ever spoken to. Just real soft spoken, just real nice. The man spends his time in between camps making jigsaws, and I'm all for that. I'm a fan of a jigsaw myself, but
Legend.
I think this is a good stylistic matchup for him. But I want to say about Tony Gravely is I feel for him that, you know, he shouldn't have been in a position where he's fighting an up-and-comer like this. It's like he's maintaining this same position at the bottom of cards, fighting these kind of up-and-comers, fighting these outside of the top 15 guys, and it's a little bit unfair for his body of work so far. So look at it, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, because, you know, you're going in against Javid Basharat. You play around on the feet, you're playing with fire with Basharat, in my opinion. You've got to take this fight down, and then taking a fight down and dominating on the mat is not going to do you any favors from the entertainment standpoint, or maybe getting matchups. I would have liked, even after that uppercut knockout win over Johnny Munoz, to see him maybe get a little bit more of a well-known name in the bantamweight division. Not a top 15 guy, but maybe a well-known name outside the top 15. And I hope with a win here against a really good guy that he gets that opportunity, because, you know, this is his 7th UFC fight. And it seems for the entirety of those 7 fights, he's been fighting similar enough competition in guys who are around the same level as him. And it's just so hard to kind of, you know, on nights like that, you lose to your Brett Johns, you lose to your Nate Manuses. You know what I mean? There could be a night where he loses to Javid Basharat, but I think if he plays his cards right coming into this fight and closes the distance safely and gets the fight down, I feel he will have that dominant kind of ability to kind of control him there, land some strikes, maybe play around on the feet late in the fight then when the damage has been done. But you would like to come in with a final point before we wrap it up?
I've just seen some breaking news.
Oh.
And I would like to hear your reaction. UFC Fight Night, October 29th, headlined by Arnold Allen versus Calvin Kattar.
Oh, shit, son. Oh, love it. Love that fight. That's a great fight. I'm very happy for Arnold Allen. That's the right fight to make. Yes. That is a good one. We'll have fun breaking down that one.
I mean, I will say just before we hop off, I don't like this fight and I love this fight. I don't like this fight because I think Arnold should have been calling for a title shot.
Yes.
After his last win. Dan Hooker, no joke. Get a win in the way that you get a win over him. You call for a title shot immediately. You don't do the nice guy thing and be like, well, Calvin Kattar's above me, so I should probably have that fight. This is not the way the UFC works right now. But as a fight, fuck me, what a fight this is. Unbelievable, as Brad Wharton would say.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, it's a really good fight. You're not going to get Calvin Kattar out of there too easy. He went 5 rounds, lost a split decision to Josh Emmett in his last fight. So it'll be interesting to see. Good test for Arnold Allen. And surely you've got to be calling for a title shot next after this if you take out Kattar. And it's as simple as that. But we'll see. We will talk about that at the time. For now, we need to concentrate on this card, which is Cory Sandhagen and Song Yadong. They will go at it in the main event on Saturday night. We will be watching along. We will enjoy that fight for what it is. Lots of questions up in the air. How good is Song Yadong? It would be a colossal upset if he were to go in there and knock Sandhagen out. It's going to be exciting to see. Sandhagen will try and springboard his attempts to get back into the title contention in the bantamweight division. That was the preview show for this week. We will be back again. Do we have the week off next week? We have a week off coming up soon.
I have no idea. I just look at fights and I talk about them. I have no idea what schedules.
We will be back. Maybe next week, maybe not, but we'll definitely back whenever the next UFC card is going down to break that down. Possibly even a full house. Spencer will return and we will break it down as we always do. But before we go, head on over to All Real Nutrition, eatallreal.com, enter the code word SevereMMA. Get yourself 15% off those delicious protein bars. Follow it all down the bottom of the screen right now. One more thing, and I'll ask you one more favor before we go. We're going to replace the All Real Nutrition with that barcode up in the top corner, which will bring you directly to the Severe MMA Patreon account, where we have lots of fantastic content over there. Just $5, €5, whatever it is. I think it's like maybe $6 over here in Canadian. €5, £5, whatever you want to call it, wherever it is. No matter where you are in the world, no matter what it costs, it's worth it. It's worth it. Speaker's Corner that Harry does is brilliant. Q&A with Shawnee, Contender with me and Shawnee, Chase and Pack with me and Shawnee. Loads and loads and loads of content there for you to check out. One Man Boot, Harry will be coming back strong with another one soon. I'm assuming for the UFC 280 card, one, maybe two. Thus, two One Man Boots coming up for us to enjoy. Check out his Severe Spotlight article on SevereMMA.com every Monday, highlighting the best up-and-coming talent in the UFC, highlighting the best performer in the card. Nobody wants the performance bonus anymore. They just want to be on Harry's Severe Spotlight, and that's a fact. So we better get used to it. I hope check out the Owl Triangle and Dylan Tucon this week. Check out Harry at BJJ_Harry Powell on Twitter. I'm O'Neill MMA on Twitter. We shall talk to you the next time, folks. Goodbye. Good luck.